Okay, so you want to sound more fluent when you speak English?
Right.
You know, like be able to use those just right kind of words, the ones that make people go, whoa. That's what we're tackling today. And we're going way beyond basic vocabulary lists. You know, we're talking strategies to really level up your communication, advanced adjectives, verbs that pack a punch. And yes, we're going to tackle idioms and those phrasal verbs.
You hit the nail on the head when you said just right words, because that really is the key. A lot of times, I think we all fall into the trap of using, well, kind of generic vocabulary day after day. I mean, think about how often you use words like good or bad or interesting. They work, they get the message across. But
they're not exciting.
Exactly. They lack that precision that that really captivating speakers use.
Okay, so you're right. I am totally stuck in a vocabulary rut. I can admit it. But where do you even start to break out of that? Is it just like memorizing a ton of new words?
Not exactly. Memorization is definitely part of it, don't get me wrong. But the real secret is knowing how to choose the right word for the right situation.
Right.
For example, you mentioned interesting, which is fine, but what if you want to be more specific? So let's say you're talking about a book. You could say it's engaging or thought-provoking, you know, maybe even challenging. Each word gives the listener a slightly different picture.
Oh, that's a great point. It's kind of like choosing the right color.
Yeah.
Cerulean, cobalt, indigo. They're all blue, but
they evoke totally different moods?
yes. So instead of just saying somebody is good at their job, we could say they're diligent or resourceful.
Ooh.
Or even visionary.
Now you're getting it. And the great thing is you're not just adding words to your vocabulary toolbox. You're also expanding your ability to really express yourself.
With like more clarity.
Exactly. Yeah. More impact. Think of it like adding a high definition lens to your communication. Everything becomes sharper, more focused.
More memorable. Okay, I'm convinced. But now for the big question. How do we actually remember all these awesome new words? My brain feels full just thinking about it.
That's where we introduce something called spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
Yeah, and it's not about cramming. It's more about strategically timing when you review the words to, well, make them stick. So imagine you have a flashcard with the new word on it. You look at it today, then tomorrow, maybe 2 days later, and then a week later. And each time you see it, you're strengthening those neural pathways in your brain.
So you're basically building muscle memory, but for your brain.
Yeah, exactly. And there are actually tons of apps and tools out there that can help you with this. Some people, they just like good old-fashioned flashcards, you know, while others prefer those digital flashcard apps, the ones that automatically schedule your reviews.
Oh, cool.
It all comes down to what works best for you, really.
Speaking of making things stick, this is one area I always struggle with. Idioms. They can be so confusing. It's like a whole secret language.
They really can be tricky. But they're also fascinating because they often reflect a culture's history, you know, or their values, and even their sense of humor.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so for example, take the idiom, kick the bucket.
Kick the bucket.
It's, well, a pretty blunt way to say that someone has died, right? But it's thought to have come from the practice of people who were about to be hanged standing on an overturned bucket. So when they were ready, they'd kick the bucket away.
Wow, I never knew that. It's crazy how much history and culture are packed into these seemingly simple phrases.
It really is. And not only does understanding idioms make you a better communicator, but it also gives you a deeper understanding of, well, the language itself.
Okay, so we've talked about choosing the right words and making them stick, like actually remembering them. But how do we go beyond just flashcards, you know? How do we actually start using all these new words out in the wild? Like in real conversations?
That's the real challenge.
It can be intimidating, like trying to casually slip in a new word when you're just chatting with someone.
It's true. Knowing a word and being able to use it confidently, they're two different things.
Totally.
It takes practice.
Practice, practice, practice.
It's like any skill, right? Think about it like learning an instrument. You wouldn't expect to play a concerto perfectly after, what, just a few lessons?
Well, why?
It takes time, repetition, a willingness to, you know, experiment and maybe even make a few mistakes along the way.
So how can we practice using new words in a way that feels natural, not forced?
Well, for starters, you're already doing something fantastic by listening to this deep dive.
Oh, thanks.
Podcasts are like a goldmine for vocabulary. You get exposed to all sorts of words and phrases used in, well, in real-life situations, but don't stop there.
Okay, what else?
Try reading articles or books about things you enjoy, maybe watch movies or TV shows with subtitles, and even just pay attention to the way people talk in everyday conversations. Really listen.
So it's like turning everyday life into this vocabulary treasure hunt.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, so I gotta admit, I sometimes feel like I get stuck in a rut with my verbs. Like I always use the same ones: make, do, get. Are there any power verbs out there? Verbs that could really take my speaking and writing to the next level?
Oh, absolutely. Verbs are the engines of our sentences, right? And using strong verbs, vivid verbs, that can make your language so much more dynamic and engaging.
Okay, I like where this is going.
For example, instead of saying make a decision, you could say arrive at a decision or determine the best course of action. And instead of get better, you could say improve, excel, even flourish.
Flourish. I like that. It just sounds so much more, I don't know, elegant than get better.
Right. And don't be afraid to play around with different synonyms. See which ones feel right to you. Certain verbs might fit your personal style better, or maybe the tone of what you're trying to communicate.
It's all about finding those verbs that really pack a punch, the ones that bring your language to life. Okay, so before we wrap up, is there anything else we should cover?
Well, we talked about idioms, but let's not forget phrasal verbs.
Oh yeah, phrasal verbs.
They can be tricky, but they're also a really important part of sounding, well, natural and fluent in English.
Totally. They're those little word combos that can, completely change the meaning of a verb, like give up versus give in. Two very different things.
Exactly. And what's interesting about phrasal verbs is that they're often more informal, more conversational than their, more formal counterparts. So, for example, you might say, I need to reduce my expenses in a formal setting, but in casual conversation, you'd probably say, I need to cut back on my spending.
That's a great example. It's those little subtle shifts in the way you use language that can really make a difference. So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. Choosing the right words, remembering them, and even starting to use them, like with those power verbs and phrasal verbs. It's a lot. I'm kind of feeling overwhelmed, to be honest.
I get it. It's a lot to take in all at once. Expanding your vocabulary, it's definitely a journey, not a sprint. The key is to, be patient with yourself and focus on making those small but consistent steps forward.
Okay, that makes sense. Don't try to do everything at once.
Exactly.
So what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember as they, continue on this vocabulary adventure?
I think it's all about cultivating a sense of curiosity and playfulness with language. Don't be afraid to experiment, try new things, make mistakes.
Yeah.
Have fun with it. Think of each new word as a chance to, expand your world a little bit, to express yourself more fully, maybe connect with others on a deeper level.
I love that. So it's not about conquering vocabulary. It's more about embracing it.
Exactly. And remember, learning never really ends. There are always going to be new words to discover, new nuances to explore, new ways to express yourself, So embrace the journey and enjoy the ride.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our awesome listeners out there, I hope you're feeling inspired to keep expanding your vocabularies. Remember, even small steps, they can lead to huge improvements in your fluency and confidence.
Absolutely. And here's a final challenge for you. I want you to pick just one new word from today's deep dive. Maybe it's diligent, maybe flourish, maybe even thought-provoking. And then try to use it 3 times today.
Ooh, I like it.
In your conversations, in your writing, even just in your own head, And just notice how it feels to, bring that word to life.
Yes, make it your own.
Make it part of your own unique voice.
That's a great challenge.
Okay.
So embrace the power of words and let them empower you. And until next time, happy wordsmithing. Wow. Looks like someone's ready to unlock some serious English pronunciation skills.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, we've got a mountain of material here.
All about mastering the art of speaking English clearly, naturally, confidently. You name it.
That's right. And it's something that every English learner thinks about at some point.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's what's so cool about pronunciation.
It's a skill that you can always keep refining.
No matter what level you're at, there's always room to grow.
Absolutely.
So for this deep dive, we're going to break down those essential building blocks of pronunciation.
We'll offer some practical tips and techniques
that you can start using right away.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's lay the groundwork first.
When it comes to pronunciation, we have to start with the foundation.
The foundation? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, think of it like this. Phonemes are the smallest units of sound in any language.
So like the building blocks of words.
Exactly. They're the individual sounds that distinguish one word from another.
Like cat versus hat.
Precisely, the difference is just one phone.
I see. And why are phonemes so important for English learners?
Because English has a lot of sounds that might not exist in other languages.
Right, like the dreaded the sound.
Yes, that's a classic one.
It always trips me up.
But once you understand how to make those sounds, it unlocks a whole new level of fluency.
So mastering phonemes is like having the secret code to speaking English clearly.
Exactly. It's all about training your ear and your mouth to produce those specific sounds.
I'm ready to crack the code.
Perfect. So how about we tackle some of those notorious English sounds that learners often find challenging?
Let's do it. I know our listeners are eager to finally conquer these.
All right, so the th sound is a good place to start.
Oh yes, please help us with that one.
It can be tricky because it involves placing your tongue in a very specific position.
Where exactly?
Gently bite the tip of your tongue between your teeth and let the air flow out.
Like this.
Almost, you need to make sure the air is flowing between your tongue and your teeth.
Okay, let me try again.
Perfect, you're getting it.
And I remember there are actually two types of thith sounds, right?
That's right. There's the voiced thith, like in the word this, where your vocal cords vibrate.
Ah, so that's the difference.
And then there's the unvoiced ith, like in the word think, where your vocal cords don't vibrate.
So subtle, but so important.
Exactly. And mastering this distinction can make a huge difference in your pronunciation.
Okay, let's move on to another tricky sound pairing that I always mix up.
Sure, which one are you thinking of?
It's the short I sound versus the long E sound.
Ah, like in ship versus sheep?
Yes, those ones, they seem so similar, but they change the meaning of the word completely.
Absolutely. This is why paying attention to vowel length is crucial.
Vowel length.
Yep. In ship, the vowel is short and clipped, while in sheep, it's longer and drawn out.
So it's not just about the tongue position, it's also about how long you hold the sound.
Exactly, you got it. And the best way to get these sounds right is to practice them slowly and deliberately.
Really focus on the subtle differences.
And listen carefully to how native speakers pronounce them.
I'll definitely be paying more attention to that from now on.
Awesome, so now that we've tackled some of the individual sounds,
let's talk about how to bring those sounds together and make them flow naturally.
You're talking about stress and intonation.
Exactly, those elements that give English its rhythm and musicality.
They're essential for sounding like a native speaker.
And for conveying meaning effectively.
Right, because English is a stress-timed language, which means we emphasize certain syllables and words.
While others are less prominent.
Exactly, and this pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables creates the rhythm of English speech.
So it's not just about pronouncing each word correctly, it's also about emphasizing the right parts of the sentence.
Precisely. Think of it like music. The stressed syllables are like the beats that you tap your foot to.
And the unstressed syllables are like the notes in between.
Exactly. And by mastering stress and intonation, you can make your English sound more natural and engaging.
It's like adding a layer of expression to your speech.
Absolutely. You can use stress and intonation to convey emotions, highlight important information, and even add humor to your sentences.
Okay, so how can we practice stress and intonation?
One effective technique is to listen to native speakers and try to imitate their rhythm and emphasis.
That makes sense. We can learn by example.
And another fun way to practice is to use tongue twisters.
Oh, I love them. They're challenging, but so much fun.
Tongue twisters force you to pay attention to individual sounds and to pronounce them clearly and quickly.
Like the classic, "She sells seashells by the seashore."
Exactly. That one's a great workout for your tongue.
And they're great for improving clarity.
Yes, and don't forget about minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs.
Those are pairs of words that differ by just one sound, like pat and bat, or sheep and ship.
Ah, yes, we talked about those earlier.
Practicing with minimal pairs helps you to distinguish between similar sounds and to produce them accurately.
It's like a workout for your ears and your mouth at the same time.
Exactly. It sharpens your listening skills and your pronunciation.
Now, for our listeners who are really serious about taking your pronunciation to the next level, what would you recommend?
For those who are ready to level up, I'd suggest trying the shadowing technique.
Shadowing, what's that?
It involves finding audio of a native speaker you admire, maybe a TED Talk or a podcast.
Okay.
And then you listen and repeat what they're saying as closely as possible.
So you're like their shadow, mimicking their every word and intonation.
Exactly. You want to try to match their rhythm, their pauses, their emphasis, everything.
It sounds intense.
It is, but it's incredibly effective for improving your pronunciation and fluency.
Wow, I'm definitely going to try that.
I think you'll be amazed by the results.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from phones to stress and intonation to shadowing.
It's been a deep dive into the world of English pronunciation.
And I think the main takeaway is that anyone can improve their pronunciation with the right tools and techniques.
Absolutely. Practice is key, but having a good understanding of the fundamentals makes all the difference.
So to our listener, what are you waiting for?
There's a world of English content out there just waiting to be practiced.
Pick a favorite movie, a podcast, a song, whatever inspires you, and start speaking.
The more you practice, the more confident and natural you'll sound.
And who knows? Maybe one day you'll be the one inspiring others with your amazing English pronunciation.
Now that's a goal worth striving for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, have fun with it.
You got it.
That's it for this deep dive.
Until next time.
Happy speaking.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, let's jump right into this deep dive. And today we're looking at something a little different, something a little bit more fun.
Fun is right.
Road trip English is what we're calling it. We're going to be exploring all those words and phrases you need to sound like a seasoned traveler, even if you've never left your hometown.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. When you're on a road trip, there's a certain, energy, a vibe to the way people talk.
There is, yeah. And I think we're going to try to tap into some of that today with the help of this really fun YouTube video from Learning English Podcast.
This is great because you get to hear people using English naturally, like they would if they were actually
Packing the car.
packing the car, getting ready to hit the road.
Not like some stiff textbook example, you know.
Right.
And one of the first things they say is, the car's packed. Which, I mean, come on. Who doesn't love hearing those words?
It's like music to my ears.
It's like the official start of the adventure.
It is. And
Passports, check.
passports, snacks,
Check. Bad music.
trouble check. And speaking of the road trip essentials, they really highlight 3 language takeaways that I think are super useful. Munchies, fill up the tank, and pit stop.
The holy trinity of road trip vocabulary.
Absolutely. Now, munchies, that one's interesting because it's more than just food, right? It's those specific snacks you crave on a road trip.
Yeah, it's got to be like chips, candy, maybe some questionable gas station food.
You know those beef jerky things that are shaped like...
like a Slim Jim or something.
A Slim Jim, exactly. Now, while you're working your way through those munchies, you're probably going to have to fill up the tank at some point.
Inevitably.
Yep.
Can't get very far on an empty tank, right?
Nope, especially if you're going on a long-haul road trip like those ones you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. I used to take these epic road trips up to northern Canada with my family, 8 hours in the car.
Wow, 8 hours?
Yeah, we'd pack up the car and just drive and drive and drive until we reached this beautiful lake surrounded by forests.
Sounds amazing. I've got a road trip story too, actually more of a guy's trip to Las Vegas.
Ooh, Vegas. All right, now we're talking.
A bit of a different vibe than a family trip to Canada, but hey, it's all about the journey, right?
It is, and you know what else is essential for the journey?
Besides those munchies.
Besides the munchies, the pit stop.
Pit stop, and that could be anything from a bathroom break to a chance to stretch your legs or even a quick detour to see a giant ball of yarn or something, you know.
Oh, I love a good roadside attraction.
Yeah.
And it's funny how pit stop has moved beyond just racing. Now it's like an everyday expression.
Right. It's become this universal term for a quick stop, a pause in the action.
Exactly. But here's where the video gets really interesting. They go beyond individual words and start showing us how to put those words together into phrases that make you sound super fluent.
Like a native speaker, basically.
Exactly. And they highlight 2 phrases in particular that I think are going to be game changers for you guys. The first one is, we've got all our bases covered.
So they use this in the context of packing the car, making sure they haven't forgotten anything, but think about what it really means.
Yeah, it's deeper than just packing a suitcase. It's like a whole mindset.
It is. It's about being prepared, being thorough.
It's that feeling of, bring it on, world wording, I'm ready for anything.
Which is kind of perfect for a road trip, right?
Yeah, you're heading into the unknown, so you want to feel like you've got everything handled.
Exactly. And the best part is you can use this phrase in so many situations outside of road trips too. Imagine you're giving a big presentation at work. You've done your research, you've got your slides ready. You could say to your team, hey, we've got all our bases covered.
Boom, instant confidence boost right there.
Right, everyone's on the same page, everyone's feeling good.
Okay, now are you ready for the second putting it together phrase?
Hit me, that's it.
It's, let's get going. Simple, direct, but so effective.
And think about all the variations you can create just by switching out the verb.
Ooh, yeah, let's get cooking. Let's get this show on the road. Let's get out of here.
I love how you can add a touch of humor or personality just by changing that one word.
It's like a little linguistic magic trick.
A magic trick that makes you sound more natural and fluent in English.
And that is exactly what we want to help you achieve.
Now, speaking of getting going, I think it's about time we took a little pit stop of our own.
A pit stop for our brains to process all this awesome info.
Oh, we've covered a lot, but we're just getting started. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to be exploring even more ways to level up your road trip English.
We'll be back at a flash, so stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to our road trip through English. You guys ready to hit the gas on those phrases we talked about?
You bet. I'm feeling energized and ready to roll.
That's the spirit. And in this part of our deep dive, we're going to shift gears a bit and explore what the video calls the fluency builder.
Fluency builder sounds intense.
It's not as scary as it sounds. It's all about those little tweaks you can make to your English to sound smoother and more natural.
Oh, like those subtle things that native speakers do without even thinking about it.
Exactly. And one example they give is, instead of saying, "Are we ready to go?" which is perfectly fine, you could say, "So, are we all ready to go?"
Oh, I see. Adding that "so" at the beginning makes it sound more like a conversation starter.
Exactly. It's like you're easing into the sentence, making it more casual and friendly.
Like you're checking in with everyone, making sure they're all on board with the plan.
Right. And they give another great example. Instead of just saying, "It is ready," you could say, "It's all set."
It's all set. Yeah, that definitely has a more natural ring to it.
And think about it in the context of our road trip. Instead of "the car is ready," you could say, "The car's all set."
It's like you can practically hear the excitement in those words.
Exactly. You can picture everyone piling into the car, ready for the adventure to begin.
And what's really cool is that the video encourages you to practice these phrases out loud. Try them out at different speeds.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about understanding the words, it's about actually feeling them in your mouth.
Getting comfortable with the sounds, the rhythm, the whole flow of the sentence.
Absolutely. And speaking of flow, you know what I find really interesting? How these seemingly simple phrases can actually reveal a lot about the culture behind a language.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Well, think about the phrase, "We've got all our bases covered." It speaks to this idea of preparedness, right?
Yeah, like being organized, having a plan, being ready for any situation.
And that emphasis on preparedness, it's something you often see in American culture.
Right, like we like to feel in control, like we've got everything handled.
Exactly. But in other cultures, you might find phrases that emphasize spontaneity or going with the flow.
That's so true. Different cultures, different values, different ways of expressing themselves through language.
And it's all reflected in the way they speak. Which brings me to a thought I had earlier when we were talking about packing the trunk of the car.
Oh yeah, the trunk.
It made me realize how, even within the same language, you can have regional differences in vocabulary.
You mean how some people might call it the boot instead of the trunk?
Exactly. And it's just a small example of how language is constantly evolving, adapting to different regions and influences.
That's what keeps language learning so exciting. There's always something new to discover.
It's like a road trip in itself, full of unexpected twists and turns and new discoveries around every corner.
Speaking of twists and turns, remember that epic road trip to Las Vegas you mentioned?
Oh yeah, how could I forget? Let's just say it involved a questionable map, a detour through a ghost town, and maybe a few too many roadside diners.
Okay, now you have to tell me more about that ghost town. Was it actually haunted?
It might have been, but I think we should probably save that story for another time. We don't want to get too sidetracked from our language journey.
Fair enough. But it does remind me of another great phrase from the video. Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Perfect for those unexpected adventures, right?
Absolutely. It's about being open to new experiences, embracing the unknown.
Like saying, "Hey, we might encounter a few bumps in the road, but that's all part of the fun."
It's that adaptable, flexible mindset that makes road trips so memorable. And language learning, too, for that matter.
That's a great point. Because sometimes those unexpected detours lead to the most amazing discoveries, both on the road and in life.
And speaking of valuable discoveries, I think we have one last stop on our linguistic road trip today.
We do, and it's a big one. We're going to wrap things up with a thought-provoking question that will hopefully send our listeners off on their own language adventures.
Ooh, I love a good cliffhanger. Let's head to our final destination. Well, here we are, folks, the final stretch of our road trip through English. And I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty inspired to hit the open road myself.
Me too. And you know what's great is that even if we can't hop in a car right this second, we can still take all these awesome phrases with us wherever we go.
Exactly. They're not just for road trips, they're for life. And before we officially wrap things up, let's do a quick recap of those linguistic gems we've uncovered.
Sounds good to me. Let's see. We started with those essential vocab words, munchies, fill up the tank, and pit stop.
Ah, yes. The holy trinity of road trip lingo.
Words that instantly paint a picture in your mind, right?
They do. And then we moved on to those putting it together phrases, the ones that really help you sound more fluent and confident.
Like, we've got all our bases covered.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. It's not just about packing a suitcase, it's about that feeling of being prepared and ready for anything.
Exactly. And it works in so many different situations, not just road trips.
It's like a universal confidence booster.
It is. And of course, we can't forget the incredibly versatile let's get going.
Oh yeah, let's get going, let's get cooking, let's get out of here. So many possibilities.
Just by changing that one word, you can express a whole range of emotions and ideas.
Like a little language hack.
Yeah.
But beyond the individual words and phrases, what I've really enjoyed about this deep dive is how it's made me think about the connection between language and culture.
That's one of the things I love most about language learning. You're not just learning words, you're learning about a whole way of life.
Yeah. Like the casualness of munchies, the emphasis on preparedness in having all your bases covered, the adaptability of go with the flow. They all tell us something about the culture behind the language.
It's like each phrase is a window into a different way of seeing the world.
And now I believe it's time for that thought-provoking question you mentioned, the one that will send our listeners off on their own linguistic adventures.
All right, so imagine this. You're given the keys to a brand new car and told you can go on a road trip anywhere in the world. Where would you go? And maybe even more importantly, what munchies would you pack for the journey?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So many options. I think for me it would have to be a coastal drive along the Pacific Coast Highway with a bag of salty chips and maybe some fresh fruit from those roadside stands.
Sounds amazing. I'm more of a mountains kind of guy, so I'd probably head to the Rockies with a cooler full of craft beers and those locally made beef jerky snacks.
Ooh, yeah, those are good. See, this is what I love about road trips and language learning. It's all about exploring new places and trying new things.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe along the way you'll even pick up some new phrases and slang to add to your linguistic toolkit.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Expanding our horizons, both geographically and linguistically.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those conversations flowing.
Safe travels, everyone, and until next time, happy language learning.
Happy travels. Hey there, all you language lovers out there. Welcome back today. We're taking a deep dive into something I know a lot of you want.
Oh, yeah.
To conquer, improving your English skills, and doing it fast.
Right.
We're digging into an article from EF English Live called 15 Best Tips for Improving English Quickly and Easily. But we know you value your time.
Yeah.
So we've gone through and picked out the most interesting and actionable ones. Get ready for some unconventional advice.
Oh, fun.
Like actually thinking in English and changing up your teachers.
Yeah, it's a fascinating approach.
Yeah.
It really challenges conventional thinking about language learning.
Right. But first, let's tackle a common challenge. Finding time to practice. The article really emphasizes carving out even just a few minutes each day.
They're spot on about that. It's amazing how those small, consistent efforts can snowball into significant progress over time. Like micro-learning, where you dedicate even 5 or 10 minutes at a time is incredibly effective because of how our brains thrive on repeated exposure. Think about it. How did you master your native language? Not through cramming, but through years of daily interaction.
Okay, so consistent baby steps are key. Got it.
But what about vocabulary? There's always a mountain of new words to learn.
Well, there's this clever tip in the article that I absolutely love. Learn 4 new words every single morning.
Whoa, hold on. Every morning, even before my coffee kicks in.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Think about how often do you find yourself struggling to find the English word for something. This tip suggests you write those words down. Like literally the article says before you even reach for that caffeine, you look them up in a dictionary or online. It turns those I wish I knew the word for this moments into learning opportunities.
I'm already feeling smarter. Simple, actionable, and totally fits into any routine. But how do we actually make those words stick? Any pro tips on that? Repetition is key for sure. The article suggests carrying a notebook with your new words throughout the day. But I'd add a memory hack. Create your own examples, even silly ones. It's like trying to remember someone's name. You use it in conversation right away, and boom, it sticks.
Love it. Speaking of personalizing things, the article also talks about understanding your own unique learning style.
Yeah.
Some of us are visual learners, others auditory, some kinesthetic. I am definitely someone who learns best through listening. It's why I can remember song lyrics after hearing them just a few times.
That's a perfect example. And it leads perfectly into the next set of tips, which revolve around immersion and exposure. The article talks about watching movies and TV shows in English, listening to music, even just having English language programming on in the background. Think of it as marinating your brain in the sounds and rhythms of the language.
This is where it gets fun. They specifically mention using subtitles at the beginning, especially for action movies with straightforward plots, to help you follow along.
Exactly. And gradually weaning yourself off those subtitles as you get more comfortable. Think of it like training wheels for your ears. It's incredible how much your brain can absorb even when you're not actively focusing on every single word. Have you ever noticed how after listening to a song a few times,
Yeah.
you start to pick up the lyrics, even if you weren't consciously trying to learn them?
Oh, totally. It's like your brain is working behind the scenes, soaking it all up. And speaking of passive learning, they also suggest listening to English music or podcasts during downtime. I'm a total podcast nerd, so that one's easy for me. I've actually learned a ton of slang and colloquialisms just from listening to conversational podcasts.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're already ahead of the game. And speaking of games, let's switch gears to active practice, because soaking it all in is great, but at some point you got to jump in the pool. The article highlights turning idle time into useful time. So instead of mindlessly scrolling through social media, you could be squeezing in quick English lessons on your phone.
I'm all about finding those hidden pockets of time. What about finding people to practice with?
That's another gem from the article. They suggest finding fellow students to chat with, or even designating an English hour with family each week. It's about creating fun, low-pressure opportunities to actually use the language.
Wait, an all-English breakfast every Sunday? My family might actually mutiny.
Well, maybe start with something a little less intense. How about introducing a no native language rule during game night? The point is to create opportunities to actively use the language in a relaxed and fun environment. Even if it starts with a few giggles and raised eyebrows, you'll be surprised how quickly everyone adapts.
I love that idea. Okay, I'm feeling brave. What's the wildest tip they have?
Buckle up. They suggest you try thinking in English.
Wait, what? Like all the time?
As much as possible. It's a challenge, but the benefits are huge. Think about it when you constantly translate back and forth in your head. It creates this mental roadblock to fluency.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you even start to do that?
The article suggests easing in. Try narrating your daily activities in your head, like I'm brushing my teeth or I'm making coffee.
Yeah.
If you hit a word you don't know, jot it down and look it up later. It's like building those mental muscles one thought at a time.
I'm actually excited to try that. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from finding those precious minutes for practice to literally rewiring our brains to think in English. Any big takeaways before we move on?
Absolutely. I think what's exciting is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
The key is to find what works best for you. Be consistent and don't be afraid to get creative.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey. We'll be back with part 2 of this deep dive soon, where we'll unpack even more specific and surprising tips for English mastery. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into mastering English. Before we jump into thinking in English.
Yeah.
Quite the challenge, right?
It is.
But I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, goal setting.
Yes, goal setting is so crucial. But let's be real, staying motivated can be tough, especially when we hit those inevitable plateaus.
You're absolutely right. The article reminds us to celebrate those wins no matter how small. It's like training for a marathon. You don't just focus on the finish line. You celebrate every mile you conquer. Each new word learned, each conversation you have, those are victories worth acknowledging.
Love that analogy. It's all about recognizing progress, not perfection.
Exactly. Speaking of celebrating small wins, the article highlights something interesting. Even passive exposure to English is beneficial.
So like even overhearing a snippet of conversation at the coffee shop can help.
You got it. It might sound strange, but even those tiny moments of exposure add up. It's like your brain is constantly gathering data, becoming more attuned to the sounds and rhythms of the language.
It's like when you're learning a new musical instrument, even passively listening to music in that style can help train your ear.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of training your ears, the article has some really helpful advice on maximizing your learning from watching movies and TV shows in English.
Oh yeah, they talked about using subtitles as a starting point, which I think is a smart move. Sometimes I get so focused on reading the subtitles that I almost forget to actually listen.
That's a common trap. The key is to wean yourself off those subtitles as you progress. It's about gradually shifting from relying on the written word to truly understanding the spoken language.
The article also recommends easing in with action movies or shows that have clear storylines.
Makes sense. The visual cues can really help bridge the gaps in your understanding, especially at the beginning. Then as you get more comfortable, you can level up to more dialogue-heavy shows.
You know what I find helps? British period dramas. The language is so rich and nuanced.
Excellent choice. And don't underestimate the power of revisiting movies or shows you've already seen. It's amazing how many new words and phrases you can pick up on a second or third viewing.
It's like reading a favorite book multiple times. You always discover something new. Now, what about music? They touched on that too.
Music is a fantastic tool, especially for pronunciation, and getting a feel for the natural flow of the language. Think about it. We learn our first language through songs and rhymes. Why not tap into that same power when learning English?
Right. I know so many people who swear by learning through song lyrics.
It's incredibly effective. And you don't have to stick to just pop music. Branch out, explore different genres, really listen to the lyrics and try singing along. Don't worry if you don't catch every word at first. It's all about immersing yourself in the sounds.
I have a friend who loves listening to audiobooks in English, even though she's a beginner. I'm always impressed by that.
That's a great strategy. Audiobooks can be challenging at first, but they're amazing for improving your listening comprehension and expanding your vocabulary. You're getting exposed to a wider range of vocabulary and sentence structures than you might in everyday conversation.
The article doesn't specifically mention audiobooks, but they do highlight the power of podcasts.
Oh, yes. Podcasts are a gold mine for language learners. You can find podcasts on virtually any topic imaginable, so there's something for everyone.
And because they're often conversational, you're getting a taste of more natural, everyday English.
Exactly. They're also great for practicing on the go. You can listen while you're commuting, working out, even doing chores.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about passive immersion through things like movies, shows, music, and podcasts. But what about actively practicing our speaking skills? The article had some interesting ideas about that.
They really emphasized finding opportunities to speak English in real-life settings, even if it feels a bit intimidating at first.
Like connecting with fellow language learners for conversation practice, or even setting up an English hour with family each week.
Right. The key is to create a safe and encouraging space where you can practice without fear of judgment. Remember, mistakes are inevitable, and they're actually valuable learning opportunities.
Sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, but it's all about progress, not perfection.
I couldn't agree more. Even native English speakers make mistakes. The important thing is to just keep practicing and building your confidence.
The article also mentions utilizing online resources like language learning apps.
Yes, they specifically call out the EF English Live app.
Yeah.
But there are tons out there.
Yeah.
These apps can be great for supplementing your learning with structured lessons, grammar exercises, and vocabulary building activities.
And they often have fun features like games and quizzes to make learning more engaging.
Absolutely. They can also help you track your progress and pinpoint areas where you might need a little extra focus.
I've been using a language learning app to brush up on my Spanish, and it's been surprisingly helpful.
See, technology can be a fantastic asset when it comes to language learning.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from passive immersion to actively practicing our speaking skills and tapping into the power of technology. Before we head into the final part of our deep dive, are there any other big takeaways you want to highlight?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning. The key is to find what works best for you, stay persistent, and most importantly, have fun with it.
I love that. It's about embracing the journey and finding joy in the process of discovery.
Absolutely. Language learning is an adventure, and it's one that's well worth taking. Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve into some even more unconventional and thought-provoking tips for mastering English. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, language enthusiasts. We're in the final stretch of our deep dive into mastering English, and I'm excited to explore some of the more unconventional tips from the EF English Live article.
Me too. We've already covered so much ground, from finding time for practice and leveraging technology to embracing those all-important aha moments.
Yeah.
But now it's time to shake things up a bit.
Right. The article really encourages us to think outside the box when it comes to language learning. One tip that jumped out at me is the idea of changing teachers during online English classes. Have you ever heard of that?
It's a fascinating concept. The idea is that sticking with teachers who have the same accent or teaching style can actually limit your progress in the long run. Think about it, if you only ever spoke with people from one specific region, you might miss out on the incredible diversity of accents and dialects within the English language.
That's so true. It's like limiting yourself to just one genre of music. You'd miss out on a whole world of sound.
Exactly. Exposing yourself to different accents and teaching styles helps you develop a more well-rounded understanding of English and will make you a more confident communicator in real-world situations.
Okay, that one's going on my list of things to try. What else do they have up their sleeve?
Another interesting tip is about actively listening to other students during group classes. I know it can be tempting to zone out while waiting for your turn to speak, but the article makes a compelling case for why we should be all ears, even when it's not our turn.
I'll admit, I've definitely been guilty of that. But why is it so important?
Well, think of it this way. You're getting a free sample platter of different accents, levels of fluency, and maybe even some common mistakes that you might be making too.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it that way. It's like getting free feedback without even having to ask.
Exactly. Plus, the more you listen to others speaking English, the more you'll internalize the natural rhythms and patterns of the language, which will ultimately make you a more fluent speaker.
I'm definitely going to make a conscious effort to be a more active listener from now on. Any other unconventional gems we should know about?
We've talked a lot about the importance of active practice, but the article also stresses the value of taking time to review previous lessons and notes. It's easy to get caught up in the rush of learning new things.
Right.
But sometimes we need to slow down and let it all sink in.
So it's not just about constantly moving forward, it's also about solidifying what we've already learned.
Right. Think of it like building a house. You can't just keep adding new floors without making sure the foundation is solid.
I love that analogy. I actually find that reviewing my notes right before bed helps me remember things better.
That's a fantastic strategy. It's all about finding what works best for you and your learning style.
Okay, I'm ready for the grand finale. What's the most mind-blowing tip the article has in store for us?
Drum roll, please. They encourage you to try thinking in English.
Wait, are you serious? Like all the time?
As much as you can. I know it sounds wild, right?
Yeah.
But think about it. When you're constantly translating everything back and forth in your head, it creates this mental bottleneck.
It's like trying to run a marathon while dragging a heavy weight behind you.
Exactly. The more you can shift to thinking directly in English, the freer and more fluent your communication will become.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I'll be honest, I'm not even sure where to begin.
The article suggests starting small. Try narrating your daily activities in your head. Even simple things like, I'm getting dressed, or I'm making breakfast. And if you stumble upon a word you don't know, jot it down and look it up later.
So it's like slowly rewiring your brain to operate in English. I love that challenge.
Exactly. And you know what? You might even start dreaming in English. Now that's a sign you've truly arrived.
That's the ultimate goal. Okay, we've uncovered some seriously game-changing tips today, from shaking up our routines to literally transforming the way we think. Any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
Remember, language learning is an ongoing journey. It's about embracing the process, celebrating the small wins, and most importantly, having fun along the way.
Beautifully said. So to our listeners, we challenge you to pick one thing from this deep dive and try it this week. Whether it's finally committing to those 4 new words every morning, experimenting with a new learning app, or even daring to think in English, we guarantee you'll be amazed by the progress you can make. Until next time, happy learning.